Hello and welcome into the Jefferson Madrix podcast, the pod on a mission to normalise 18 fantasy leagues. I'm Pete, and as always, I'm joined by the friendly duo of Ian and H. Good evening, lads.
Evening.
Hello.
All very friendly on the last episode, so maybe we'll get into a few more arguments on this one. For those of you who haven't listened back to our AFC South preview, I suppose we could call these divisional previews, and our AFC North divisional previews, you should do. They were brilliant. This one is all about the NFC South. So we will kick off with the Bucks, who in 2023 finished top of the division at 9-8, their third straight division title, which tells you a lot about the state of the NFC South. They beat the Eagles 32-9 in the wildcard game, but then lost to the Lions 31-23 in the divisionals. In 2024, Bet365 have got them going slightly over 7.5 wins and second favourites for the division at 3-1. They're one of those teams where I was like, they haven't had a lot of ins or outs, really. They obviously had a couple of draft picks of note from a fantasy point of view. Jalen McMillan, wide receiver in the third round, and Bucky Irving, who's getting quite a lot of hype talked about as a running back in the fourth. I couldn't find anybody of note that had left the Bucks, so interrupt me, lads, if you can think of anyone. In terms of early ADPs, Baker Mayfield is the QB 22 after finishing last year as QB 10. Rashad White is running back 13. Mike Evans is wide receiver 16. Godwin is wide receiver 38. And K. Dotton is the tight end 18. H, thoughts on the Bucks?
They probably don't win the division. I'll be honest, I think their offense will suffer purely because of the loss of Canales to the Panthers, as they've not got a continuity. And somehow Mike Evans will end up with 1,000 yards like he normally does. Just what he does. But I'll be honest, I'm not overly keen on a lot of the players. I know there's a little bit of hype behind this Bucky Irving, the running back. He's probably worth a punt at best ball, but I saw enough of Rashad White last year to go, that's RB1. I understand Irving comes with a nice reputation and a nice running style, but he's 190 pounds. Like it's pretty lightweight for a running back. I'm not overly keen on him. I'd take a stab at Baker at his ADP, but as we mentioned on the last one, Deshaun Watson's like one after him. I don't know. Like I'd pick Deshaun Watson over Baker. Like I'm just not keen on him. I don't know why. Probably because I like their offensive coordinator quite a lot. I think he worked brilliantly last year with Baker and made Baker look like somebody that was a first overall draft pick. But yeah, just don't know. I need to see more.
And Ian, disagree? Agree?
Well, I think starting with Baker, I mean, they gave him a $4 million contract on a prove-it deal, and he proved it.
Yeah.
There is the risk that Baker is going to do Baker things and be absolute rubbish again this year. Now he's been paid, but I don't think he will. I think the Bucks will win their division again. Yeah, I think they'll win the division again. I think they've not really lost anyone, but they've added some key backup pieces like Bucky Irving and like Jalen McMillan. So I think their offense has got stronger. K. Dotton, I don't really like him at all, to be honest. For fantasy, he's just a bit of a meh player.
Yeah.
You don't get the looks. You
might
might remember
even take best ball, I don't think.
No, not even in best ball. But you might remember a while ago we had Murph from 5-yard rush on the pod, and he's a Bucks fan. And he was saying he's really excited this year about Godwin.
Yeah.
Jalen McMillan coming in means Godwin can move back to the slot where he performs really, really well. So he's quite high on Chris Godwin this year. Obviously, Mike Evans is going to do Mike Evans things. Chris Godwin's going to get the volume in the slot. Going to look like the old Chris Godwin. And Jalen McMillan, he's set up to learn from two really good receivers. Jalen McMillan, the dynasty, could be an absolute diamond.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you've just said. Apart from the fact that they're going to win the division, I'm with H. I just can't. There's a couple of teams.
Because you're going with Kirk Cousins. Let me guess.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not actually. I'm going with somebody else in this division. But
not the Saints.
There's a couple of teams that I just cannot get my head around any of their players, and the Bucks fall into this category. And the other one we've already talked about, it was the Titans. I cannot. It doesn't. Even the Panthers, and we'll get to the Panthers. I look at the Panthers and go, I can see Deontay Johnson doing something. I can do that. And like with the Bucks, I don't know whether it's just because they're all being drafted slightly higher than I would like because they did quite well last year. But I can't buy into it. I just can't buy into it. I can't sell myself into any of their players.
I kind of agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think as much as I kind of like Mike Evans, I remember, Ian, you said this. Mike Evans was your last draft pick of a redraft league last year, like, or round 15. Like
in a 15-round draft, he was my last pick of the draft.
Yeah, like that's
no one's
how
getting
much.
That price this year.
No, he doesn't fall that low, but like I look at him at 16 and I think I'm not going to take that punt there. If he falls, I will take him if he falls, but it is ADP. I just think there's probably options there that I'd prefer. Whereas if you look at Godwin's ADP, I think that's a bit too low. And I agree with Ian on the fact that I actually think Godwin's is too low and I'd take a punt on him. And I agree with the McMillan and Irving. I'd maybe take a stab at him at best ball, but that'd be it. I think there's just something about the Bucks that I just can't get on board with this year. I think it's probably because I'm, as you said there, Ian, it's probably because I prefer others in the division. But I also, from an offensive coordinator point of view, I think they've lost somebody that clearly was instrumental in that offense last year. And I think that they will suffer because of that.
I think I agree. I think Evans is you know what you kind of know what you're getting with Mike Evans. You're going to get 1,000 yards. You're going to get 9 touchdowns. You just don't know when they're coming. Yeah. And you know, as a best ball player, as a player in best ball, I can see him going 15, 16, 17 overall, and me being okay with that. But on my redraft team, I mean, obviously we play in 8-team leagues. We're a big believer in 8-team leagues. He's going as wide receiver 16, which means at best he's probably going to be a wide receiver 3. And if you're looking, so he's like in your first flex spot. If you're looking at your flex every week and Mike Evans is there, it just makes me feel slightly uncomfortable. It doesn't give me that warm, fuzzy, I think he's going to, he's going to have good weeks, but he's also going to have terrible weeks. And you just never know when they're coming. And he could win you a championship, as he did for a couple of people last year, or he could completely blow up and ruin your championship hopes, and you'd end up hating him. And I think just looking at his ADP, and I think that's basically it. If he was in the mid-20s, I think I'd be all right with it. But at 16, just to give you an idea, the people going below him, DJ Moore, I'm not sold on. But the next 3, Deebo Samuel, Michael Pittman, and Jalen Waddle, I was like, give me any one of those 3 over Mike Evans. Like, and I don't know what it is. I just feel like if I was looking at even potentially Malik Neighbors below them, although it's quite high for a rookie, but just
a rookie playing with Daniel Jones.
Looking at my roster at 5:30 on a Saturday when we're about to get into red zone, it's like Mike Evans doesn't fill me with. It doesn't matter how many 1,000-yard seasons he has, he just doesn't fill me at that particular point in the draft. He doesn't fill me with hope.
I think out of all the players that you mentioned there, Pete, the only one I'd take over Mike Evans is Pittman.
I'd take Debo as well.
If I'm there's too much uncertainty with Debo. Is he
Jalen
going to stay? No, I'd rather have Mike Evans. If I'm looking at my
I wouldn't on Waddle.
And I've got my receiver 1 and receiver 2 in, and Mike Evans is in flex, I'll say that every week. I'm happy with that.
Okay.
I'm slightly different. I personally I'd take Debo and Pittman. I'm not as keen as you are on Waddle because there's some other wife beater that plays for him, and he gets a lot of the targets. But I don't know, like I think 16 is just.
I think Waddle can have a good year this year.
I think he will have a good year, but I just don't. I don't agree with Mike Evans' ADP. I don't agree with Waddle's ADP. Like I reckon is the one after it probably Devontae Smith.
Pete.
Sorry, I didn't know. I didn't realize you were asking me that. Waddle, Neighbours, Cup, Metcalf, Smith.
See DK Metcalf. I would take DK Metcalf over him.
I'd take Cooper Cup.
I'd take Cooper Cup. Yeah, I'd take Cooper Cup. Like there are a few. He's one of them, Mike Evans, where he seems to be either really high or really low every year. There's never an ADP where you go, oh yeah, that's about right for Mike Evans. Like last year, he was in an 18 league. Yeah, all right. He was drafted in round 15 for us, and granted, our drafts are a bit crazy and everything like that, but he was still drafted there. Like
this is our problem. So we're in a position now where we remember what we got Mike Evans for last year, and we got him in the last round of an 18 league draft, and it wasn't because of Mike Evans; it was because of Baker. No one knew what was going to happen with Baker. It was nothing to do with Mike Evans. Now we know that Baker can perform, and Baker can give Mike Evans the 1,000-yard, 9-touchdown season. Obviously, his ADP is going to shoot up, and I think where he is probably about right for a 1,000-yard, 9-touchdown receiver.
Yeah, I think he's a bit high. I think that the problem with Evans is it's how he gets there. I think that just doesn't leave you with that. Because perfect example, Evans started quite well last year. You picked him up in that same league that we're talking about. You picked him up last round. You traded him to me, which you could argue, well, that was a daft decision because he went on to be the wide receiver 7. I then traded him away to somebody else. So at some point, we both gone, well, I don't. Doesn't matter where I got him or how I got him. I'm just not feeling very comfortable with him in my team, and I'm being offered other things. So he moved around in our league a few times, despite the fact that he went on to finish as the 7th wide receiver overall. So nobody doubts, and maybe he's one of those where you like. Actually, I'll look at him in best ball because I'll just take the. I do think he's a bit more. He's like a rich man's Gabe Davis for me, Mike Evans, which is a bit harsh. But
that is harsh.
I feel like, but that's how I see him. Is like, I'm either going to get 25 points or I'm going to get 5. There's he can't put 17, 18 point weeks together and stack them. It's going to be 25 or 5. And maybe three of his touchdowns will be from the 5-yard line, won't they? Yeah, but if you've got two solid wide receivers, if you've got 2 solid wide receivers, you could pick up a good running back, and he gets to Mike Evans. You go, yeah, I can afford to have his points fluctuate all over the place because I've already got Amon-Ra and I've already got whoever else that you can pick up in the top 15, and he's your 3rd choice. Then yeah, fine, I can see that, but I don't know. I just can't see me having any Bucks in the same way I can't see me having any Titans. What do you think about Rachaad White? You were quite high on Rachaad White going into last year, Ian, and then he did quite well. He finishes the RB4.
Yeah, I think he's very, very, very quickly because we're running out of time in this quarter. But I think Bucky Irving is going to mean he's going to take a hit. I mean, how big a hit depends on how good Bucky Irving turns out to actually be. But I don't think he's going to have. He's not going to have.
What worries me about Rachaad White is there was a big reliance on receptions last year. He had 272 rushing attempts and he didn't even manage 1,000 yards. He was running at 3.6 yards per carry, which he was the same as very similar to what he did the year before. He basically cannot run. He's just not a good running back. He's a good dump it down to me and then I'll get some yards and I'll add some fantasy points on.
Yeah.
So
and I think Bucky Irving being 190 pounds, like H said, he might be the go-to guy for passing downs.
Yeah. Right, onto the Saints, who finished second in the division, 9-8. In 2022, they went 7-10. In 2021, they went 9-8, and back in 2020, they went 12-4. So they've been there or thereabouts, but not putting together a great year since 2020. They are expected to get slightly more than 7.5 wins and are third favourites for the division at 7-2. The big ins, Spencer Rattler in the draft in the 5th round, and Bob Means, a wide receiver, also in the 5th round. Notable outs. I don't know if this is a notable from fantasy, not in 2024, but it might have been 4 or 5 years ago. Michael Thomas has finally left the Saints. The early 80s, Derek Carr is going as QB 30, which is unbelievable.
It's about right.
Is going as the running back 17. Kendre Miller, who I've thrown in there because I like him, is going as the running back 49. Chris Olave is going as wide receiver 12. Shaheed's going as wide receiver 62. And Juwan Johnson's going as tight end 29. So not full of fantasy studs or even decent players apart from Olave. How did you have the? I mean, I don't think. Did you tell us the Bucs? You said the Bucs were going to win. How did you have the Saints finishing when you did your predictions?
I think the Saints are going to be awful this year. I think they're going to go 4-13.
4-13. I'd take the overs on that.
Yeah, fair enough. One
Is
player
that
you
bottom
forgot
of the
to
division?
mention. Yeah, it will be bottom of the division. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it can't be because they got the Panthers in there. No, it's third in the division.
Third in the division. Not a lot of wins for the NFC South.
No, other than the Bucs. But one player you failed to mention that they picked up is Kool-Aid McKinstry. Can't not mention Kool-Aid.
What round was that?
Corner.
Second round cornerback, yeah.
Yeah, that'll be why I didn't mention him. Because he's not relevant.
No.
You're
he's
more than
relevant
happy
because
to
of his
draft.
name.
I'm quite well. I'm gonna kick us off then because I'm quite high on the Saints and I don't really know why. But I think they're just being underestimated by everyone, including apparently Ian. So I think.
Well, yeah. Are you backing on Alvin Kamara now this year, Pete?
No, I'm not backing on Alvin Kamara, but I think Kendre Miller could come in and do a good job. I think Kamara has still got a role to play, but I think they'll share the workload a little bit more as the year goes on. I like Chris Olave and I like Shaheed as well. And I think Derek Carr's never going to set the world alight. He's never going to be a fantasy quarterback that you really want. But he showed at the back end of last year that he's capable of having games that will put up the numbers and do a good job. I mean, he finished as the QB 16, which granted there was a lot of injuries last year, but to be drafted as QB 30, I mean, if you're in a really deep league, I would be taking Derek Carr above quite a lot of the people who seem to be going above him. And I like Shaheed at 62 as well. I think, especially in best ball, I think I've been taking a lot of Shaheed in best ball drafts. I'm not.
Like you can justify picking pretty much anyone in best ball, can't you? Like in best ball, you can probably justify picking Jameson Williams, who the Lions tell us is his year.
Yeah. I'd take Shaheed in redraft as well.
Yeah.
So I'm in a couple of other dynasty leagues now, and I've picked up Shaheed. I quite like him. I don't know what I think. I fell in love with him last year at best ball when he just seemed to be in my team every other week, and he was my wide receiver 1 a lot of the time. and I had
Jeez.
Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson in my best ball team, and Shaheed was getting in ahead of them too. I kind of fell in love with him a little bit. I'm high on Shaheed. I think ADP 60 odd. I'm happy to take a punt when you're looking at the absolute sort of dregs. I would take a punt on him being.
Dregs is about right, to be fair. Because
Yeah.
in the last quarter, Pete called Mike Evans the poor man's Gabe Davis, or the
rich man's Gabe Davis.
The rich man's Gabe Davis.
There's a very big difference between those two things.
Raheem Shaheed is the poor man's Gabe Davis.
Can I? One receiver that I would like to talk about is Olave. Do you not think 12 is a little high?
No.
I really like Olave. I've always really liked Olave, but I think 12 is just a shade too high, in my opinion. I'd like to see him at 16, where Mike Evans is. Your
valuation of Olave all depends on how you rate Derek Carr.
Highly, because he's a good-looking bloke.
I think Derek Carr's good enough to provide the service that Shaheed and Olave need. I don't think he's never going to be. He doesn't rush. He's never going to put up the sort of numbers that a Burrow or a CJ Stroud or anyone like that does. He's just not. That season isn't in him, not anymore. But I think he's good enough to get the ball to Olave and Shaheed. And if their offense didn't work last year, I think they've got a new offensive coordinator. They've changed things up, and I think they will be better this year. And therefore, I think I can see a lot. I don't think he's particularly high. I think 12's all right. He finished as 16 last year without particularly great quarterback play or without particularly good offense play in general. So I can see where he is. I mean, he's going behind somebody else in this division who we will talk about, who is way too high. And I've already talked about that. But I think Olave is I'm kind of about right for me. I do like him. And I think Olave's got the difference between Olave and Mike Evans is Mike Evans is going at 16, and you kind of know what Mike Evans is. Unless I can't see him repeating last year's heroics and having those sort of mega numbers, because that relies on 13, 14 touchdowns. Olave's got the potential to kind of go, actually, I can do what I did last year and a bit more, and that pushes him into the top. That pushes him into the top 10. So top 10 or 12. So I don't mind it.
I mean, as a football player, you kind of watch. I mean, I watched Ohio State when they had Olave, Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Ibuka. It was frightening to watch. And Jackson Smith and Jigba, sorry, I forgot him. But Olave for me is the one. I look at him now and I go, I just want more from you. And I'm probably really critical, and is probably what it is down to, is that he probably doesn't have the quarterback where you go, that's why I'm high on him. If you, for instance, I'll divert slightly here. I look at Marvin Harrison Jr. and go, I'm quite high on you because you have Kyler Murray as your quarterback. And I do think Derek Carr is slightly underrated. I think a lot of people hate Derek Carr when I think he's a better quarterback than people say. But I look at other
He's also
other
not
places
as good as his brother says he is.
No,
he's not. But that is a good point. You love your brother, don't you?
That's part of the reason that people hate on him so much is because his brother's a muppet going out and telling everybody how good he is. I think the reality is somewhere in the middle of the two. You've got most people are going, he's terrible, and he's going, he's the best quarterback in the league. And the reality is somewhere in the middle that we just never get to. I think
with Derek Carr last year, what people are forgetting is that he played at least a third of that season with a shoulder that was absolutely destroyed.
Yeah.
And he tried playing through the pain, playing through injury, which obviously impacted his stats and the receivers around him.
Yeah.
And he can come back this year with, he's had the off-season, fully healed shoulder. However, I'm calling it now that by the end of the season, Spencer Rattler will be QB1.
Do you reckon?
I personally don't see it. I
don't think he will.
I can see Rattler eventually taking over. I just don't see it as this year. I think it sums up perfectly what you just said there. Is Derek Carr played so banged up last year, and to be honest, he wasn't that bad of a quarterback. Like, he was all right. I just my point there was, if, let's say, for instance, you had, I don't know, an Aaron Rodgers or someone like that, you know, even a Kirk Cousins, and we're probably going to talk about the player that I think Pete is talking about in regards to this. But if you have a Kirk Cousins, and Aaron Rodgers, or Matt Stafford on that Saints team, I'm probably all in on Olave. I just think with Derek Carr, that's why I'm kind of a little bit lower on him. I still see him as a top 16 wide receiver in fantasy this year. I 100% can see it. I just think if I was going to take him probably where he's going, I feel like that's kind of where he's going to land. I don't see him instantly breaking that top 10 that you can see with other receivers.
My counter argument to that would be that Devontae Adams was the wide receiver 3 in his first year in Vegas with Derek Carr.
True.
So he's proven he can do it. I mean, Derek Carr, I was just looking at Derek Carr's stats. Do you want his fantasy? This is his fantasy finishes, QB fantasy finishes since he came into the league. 20, 14, 12, 19, 20, 17, 14, 13, 17, 16. He basically is the 16th or 17th best quarterback in the league, and will always be the 16th or 17th best option. Which is where I think, if you're in a really deep league, or like I say in best ball, or where you need multiple quarterbacks, or dynasty where you need a third or fourth option, he's my third choice option in my dynasty team now, like in our Superflex dynasty, and he's fine, because if you lose your first quarterback, or you lose your first 2 quarterbacks, or some disaster happens, it's not that bad of an option to turn to, as everyone sort of is positioning him. And I don't think going as QB 30. There are definitely not 29 quarterbacks going to finish ahead of Derek Carr this year, injuries aside.
I agree with that.
No, probably not. What goes in his favour is did he spend a first round pick on a tackle this year in Florida? That goes in Derek Carr's favour. Might keep on his feet a bit more. Might protect that shoulder. And he might have a bit more time in the pocket to get it downfield to Olave.
Yeah.
I think
he's not someone I've ever been in on.
He also seemed to lean towards Shaheed a little bit more in the game, in the bits that I watched. And let's face it, nobody watched a lot of the Saints last year, apart from maybe Saints fans. But the bits that I watched, he did seem to focus his attention on Shaheed a bit more than Olave. Like, Olave would have whole halves of the game without getting a target or a reception.
I mean, I'd have to look at the stats on this, but was it because he had to get the ball out quicker because the pocket was collapsing? And, he hadn't developed downfield for Olave, and Shaheed was there in the flat, or just running the slant, or in the mid range.
I think that, to me, they're just one of those teams where I don't know enough about it in terms of offensive coordinator, who was there last year, who's there this year, but they were so bad last year that I'm building in room for them. I mean, they were so bad and they finished 9-8 because they're not in a great division. I'm building in room for them to improve this year. And I think if anyone, for me, the division's between the Saints and the Falcons. And I don't think the Bucs stand a chance. But I'm leaning towards the Saints as it currently stands for some reason. Mentioned Kamara. Anything else you wanted to say about Kamara?
I'm still in on the guy. I know you're not. You think he's finished.
He's not finished. He's 27. Sorry, I had to put that in. I think I kind of agree a little bit with Pete. I think Kondre Miller's going to come more into it this year. I think because he started the season last year as banged up, he didn't really get going. Full bill of health off season. I can see more of a split backfield, which in hindsight probably helps Kamara because he's not that absolute workhorse now. I feel like it's about time that he he has someone to help him out, because last year he didn't have it again.
Yeah,
enough, but
I don't mind.
That might be why they're turning Taysom Hill into a halfback.
Oh. Taysom Hill needs to just move on now. I'm bored of the Taysom Hill thing. He's one of the... We're at the end, are we?
Yeah. Double down and
He's doubled down.
Yeah.
Falcons.
I
The
thought
Falcons.
I'll let you say your piece, and I thought, you know what, forget it.
I'm just going to cut him off. The Falcons finished third in the division last year, 7-10. Although they were right involved until the end, from what I can remember. I mean, they lost to the Saints, so at least up until a couple of weeks ago, they were very involved. This is the Falcons' records the last 6 years or last 7 years. 7-10 last year, 7-10 in 22, 7-10 in 21, 4-12 in 20, 7-9, 7-9, and 10-6. So 2017 was the last time they had a winning season. They are desperate for. So was that when they got to? That wasn't when they got to the Super Bowl. It was the year before.
I was just about to say that's when they got to the Super Bowl, innit? And they bottled it.
Yeah.
What, when they went 10? Yeah. Well, and they've been on the losing end of seasons ever since. In 2024, they are forecast to get to 9.5 wins, though, with the odds leading slightly over, so potentially 10 rather than 9. Division favourites at 4-5. You are not even getting your money back. Well, you get your money back, you know what I mean? You're not even doubling it up. And that is all because of the significant in of Kirk Cousins. They've also added Darnell Mooney and Michael Penix with the 8th overall draft pick. The outs Ridder, for what it's worth. The early ADPs, Kirk Cousins is going as the QB 18. That's 12 spaces ahead of Derek Carr, which blows my mind. Bijan is going as the RB2. Algier is going as the running back 51. Drake London is somehow going as the wide receiver 10, despite finishing last year as wide receiver 37. And Mooney is going as the wide receiver 74. Kyle Pitts is still waiting to break out following a good rookie year. He's going as the tight end 6. I cannot believe that Drake London is as high as he is. That's what I was getting at. And that's where I'm at. What is all about?
One key factor, Kirk Cousins. He finally has a quarterback. That's
okay.
Yeah, that is why he's going so high. People are believing in him purely
and the
because
fact that Art Smith has gone.
Yeah.
But there's also that.
Yeah, like there's enough there for the Falcons this year to be able to take a punt on those kind of players. The problem is we don't know, with Kirk Cousins coming back from Achilles, and granted, yes, he's only a pocket passer, he doesn't rush and everything like that. There's that risk. I had Kirk Cousins last year in one of our leagues, and at the time he got injured, I think he was QB5 when he got injured. Like, he was having a great season. We know he's an accurate quarterback. This is the reason I am actually high on the Falcons players this year. I'm not ADP 10 on Drake London high, but I am high on them. Like, I'll be honest, I think Algier at 50 odd when he had 1,000 yards last year in both rushing and receiving yards. I think that's too low. I think he's better than a lot of RB2s in the league. And I don't see how he gets down to 50 odd, other than the fact there's some absolute freak of nature called Bijan Robinson who's next to him.
Yeah, I think surely they're just going to give Bijan the ball over and over this year. They're not going to go, oh, let's just take him off the field and put Tyler Algier.
Yeah, they kind of eased him in last year, didn't they, Bijan?
Yeah.
Just a quick one though.
Eased him into the league. Go on.
Sorry, I know obviously it's CMC at 1. Would you not take based on last year, would you not take Breece Hall over Bijan?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I think they're going in every draft and
It's
every
2 and 3 in
mock
it.
and everything I've been going out there 2 and 3, and they're interchangeable. But I think
Yeah.
Bijan just taking it ahead of him. I've
Who's-
taken
Well,
I've taken one or the other.
he absolutely loves Brees Hall, so
I do.
they've
I've
had
taken Bijan in a couple because I've basically got too many shares of
too much
Brees
Brees
Hall. So,
Hall.
yeah,
Is
so I
it
was like,
Gibbs
I
4,
need to
Taylor
share
5?
it. Why stop asking me the questions I don't have the answers to?
Sorry.
Taylor 5.
I'm pretty sure it's Gibbs.
Jameer Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Barkley, Kyron, Achan,
Yeah.
Etienne. Who's the top 10?
Yeah. So he's top 3 Bijan. I am probably Bijan Robinson's biggest fan. I love him. I think he's a freak of nature. I think he's one of the best players. I've never been so sure on a player being amazing in fantasy football as well as real football as I have been on Bijan Robinson. Like there is no doubt in my mind he is going to be a top 3 running back this year. It's just
I was lucky enough
Brees
to go
Hall's
to
there.
I went to the Falcons Jags game at Wembley last year and had decent tickets. And it was a terrible game because it was the Falcons against the Jags. But other than that, like there was a couple of moments where Bijan just like dropped a shoulder and just completely broke someone's ankles. And I was like, he's got it. To me, he looks like he's gonna have 2 or 3 good years. Then he's gonna break something because he's gonna move too quickly, and his body's not gonna be able to keep up with it. And that'll be the end of it. We'll never see the specialness of that again. But this year,
Don't Todd Gurley me.
he's about. I definitely think Brees Hall could do it. But if I had to, this is the difference between him and Brees Hall. If I had to put my money on one of them finishing ahead of CMC as RB1, I'd probably lean Bijan. I think, unfortunately, because I think he's just got the ability to just go, we're going to give you everything. Whereas Aaron Rodgers won't allow him to have everything. Whereas I think the Falcons will. Kirk Cousins, if Bijan Robinson's running for 6 yards a carry, Kirk Cousins will just keep handing it off to him because he knows that's the best thing for the team. Whereas Aaron Rodgers will go, no, my turn to throw. I'm going to throw these 40 times a game, whether you like it or not.
No, I think the only reason where Brees Hall maybe comes into it is Tyler Algier, because to be fair to Algier, he's had a couple of really solid years, and he's not. Granted, they drafted Bijan high, and he should play more and everything like that, but you can't just completely take Algier out of it. Like your offense.
They won't take him out, but it's like he's just not going to get the use. I don't think he's going to get usage to be relevant to fantasy. Ian, what's your thoughts on the Falcons?
I think they'll have a better year. They'll have a winning year. They're going to go 10-7.
10-7.
Yeah, but they're not going to make the playoffs with that. I don't think they're going to be as good as the Bucs. I think the Falcons are a receiver short of being able to compete. Because you got Drake London.
Don't like Darnell Mooney.
Does anyone? Do you? Do you, H? Think Darnell Mooney's the wide receiver too that people get excited about? Is he as good as Chris Godwin? Absolutely not. I think the Falcons, they need another receiver.
Would you rather have Mooney or Shaheed?
Shaheed.
Yeah, I think I agree.
I think Shaheed's kind of proven it a little bit more than Mooney.
Yeah.
Mooney looked okay as a rookie. I actually don't mind the Falcons receivers if you put in there they've got Rondale Moore and Kyle Pitts, and there's been enough of Kyle Pitts for me to go, I can see why he's being drafted that high. I'm probably not going to take the gamble on him unless he starts. So what is he, tight end 6?
Yeah.
So he's in that bracket for me of he'll start dropping with the likes of
10 for me to be
10th
interested
round.
in Kyle Pitts. No, not the 10th round. He'd have to drop to an ADP of about 10 for me to be interested in Kyle Pitts.
Titan 10.
Yeah. I can't be burnt by him again.
Yeah. See,
a lot of
that's the
a lot
thing.
of it does come down to that. I think with Kyle Pitts,
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat. I like we've got 2 main redraft leagues. I had him in one. I went to get him in the other one. That was the year before last, and then he just burnt me in both leagues. And I'm like, well, this is useless. And he's one of those players that you can't leave out. Like, and until he got injured that year, I was delighted when he got injured. And I don't want anyone to get injured, but it's like right now I can take him out of my lineup because you just know that you've spent so much, you know, so much is in there. Like, you've got to stick with him. I think my issue with the Falcons is a bit like the Texans. If you look at the Texans, we talked about the Texans wide receivers in terms of ADPs. They're not all going to hit those ADPs, and my issue with the Falcons is slightly different. I can't see a situation where Bijan gets to RB2, London does enough to get to wide receiver 10, and Pitts does enough to get to tight end 6, and all of those pay off. There would have to be a really good offense for that to all pay off, and I just can't see it happening.
No, I don't see that happening. No. But while we're on Pitts, like, I'm not out on him by all means, but for Titan 6, I would feel more comfortable and more secure in my fantasy team taking Evan Ingram at that price.
Yeah.
Well, Ingram was phenomenal last year. But I can take the argument. It's just I've said it, like, for me the reason I'm high on the Falcons is because they Falcons wide receivers and tight ends is because they finally got a quarterback. I think I don't think that London gets to wide receiver 10, and I think taking him at that ADP is a massive risk. But I'd still take him. Like, it's similar to Olave. Like, I'd take him if they were there and it was a little bit lower in ADP. I'm not taking them. Same with Kyle Pitts. I think Kyle Pitts is going to be the first one of those. As I mentioned on the previous episode, you get like that 4 or 5 that go in the first 6 or 7 rounds, and then there's that break of where no one picks up a tight end, and it's who pulls the trigger first. I would probably pull the trigger on Kyle Pitts, but I'm okay. I'm okay waiting for Ingram, Njoku. I'm trying to think who else is probably out there. Ferguson at Dallas. Like, I'm okay waiting and taking one of them instead.
You'll wait for Goddard like you always do.
And got it. I probably will wait for Goddard. I'm not even going to lie.
I think the one thing that gets slightly glossed over about Kyle Pitts is he's still really young. Like, he's only a tiny bit older than Sam Laporta. He's younger than Trey McBride. I think he just feels like he's been in the league for so long because there was so much talk about him coming in. He had a good rookie year. He's been disappointed for a couple of years since, but he's still young. And as tight end, I mean, he's young in NFL player terms, but in tight end terms, I think he's still very young. We talk about Njoku on the last episode in terms of how long it took him to finally put together a good year. I think Kyle Pitts has still got that potential. It's just, the problem is there's a lot of people like me and Ian, as you just mentioned, is that once you've been burned by a player, you don't want to go jumping back into the boat to be burnt again, do you? So it's like, it's just safer to go, well, I'll go for Ingram because he hasn't burnt me.
Yeah, but to argue against myself is that there is every chance that Pitts and London can do those things that you're saying that they can't. Because Kirk Cousins did it with Hawkinson and JJ. I mean, obviously, Pitts and London aren't Hawkinson and JJ, but Kirk Cousins can support a tight end who can perform at a high level and a receiver that can perform at a wide receiver 1 level. He's done it before. There is a chance that he can do it again with Pitts and London.
My other argument is Pitts in year 1 had a quarterback and put up good numbers, and everyone was impressed with him. Then they lose Matt Ryan, and I can't even remember who it was to start with. It's just been awful quarterback after all. Yeah, like awful quarterback after all, awful quarterback since then. like now he has a quarterback. This is the year. This is the year where, I mean, if you're starting a dynasty, I'd take my chance on them both purely because this is the year where they go, yeah, we are the real deal, or no, actually we're just standard.
That leaves us with just one team, the team we've all been waiting to talk about. And we pray you stay with us for the next 15 minutes. So might not even be 15 minutes. We might just draw that line under this episode a bit early. But that team is the Carolina Panthers, who in 2023 went 2-15, finished bottom of the division, and ended up with the number 1 pick in the draft, or would have done had they not already traded that away. So their record in the last 5 years is 2-15, 7-10, 5-12, 5-11, and 5-11. That's 24 wins in the last 5 seasons. Just let that sink in for a bit. That's how exciting it is being a Panthers fan. They haven't even averaged 5 wins a season for the last 5 years. They are forecasted to get slightly over 5.5 wins this year, so maybe things are on the up. They are 4 favourites for the division at 14-1, which it's not the strongest division in the world, so maybe it's worth a couple of quid if you're a Panthers fan. They've brought in Deontay Johnson from the Steelers. Xavier Legette was 32nd overall in the draft, and Jonathan Brooks at running back was 46th overall in the draft. They didn't have any significant players last year, so none of them left. Other than Brian Burns on the defensive side?
Yeah.
Yes, we talked about outs. Early ADPs, Bryce Young is 1 place ahead of Derek Carr at QB 29. Jonathan Brooks is running back 32. Hubbard is running back 43. Deontay Johnson is wide receiver 42. Legette is wide receiver 57. Adam Thielen is wide receiver 71. And Sanders is tight end 28. That is a whole lot of nothing. I mean, in 18, if we're talking 18 fantasy redraft leagues, none of them. Brooks will probably get drafted, and Deontay Johnson will probably get drafted, but they're not your first choices. They're well down on the list.
Yeah, they are. I think I like Jatavian Sanders. I think Bryce Young, point to prove this year, might revert to just spamming his tight end. And I think Jatavian Sanders is set up to go in there and be tight end 1 straight away.
Yeah.
I think he could perform higher than where he's being drafted.
I think with the Panthers, and H, you touched on it, and his name has just escaped out of my head, but he was at the head coach. Was at the Seahawks. Canales, thank you. Did a great job with Geno at the Seahawks. Did a great job with Baker at the Bucs, and now he lands in Carolina. And he's like, if he can turn Bryce Young around, because he was bad last year. Like he wasn't. There wasn't.
Oh yeah, it was awful.
Yeah, but if he can turn him around and make him an average NFL quarterback, even just a mid 15, 16 quarterback in the league, then all of those assets are going to perform better than their current ADP. Whether they're going to perform high enough to actually make a difference on your fantasy team is one thing, but they can get to 6 or 7 wins, and they could have a couple of players where you go, oh yeah, I'll bring him in as a waiver pick or whatever. But without that, the only one I'm looking at is Jonathan Brooks, because he can do. It doesn't matter how good your quarterback is. If you've got a good running back, he could come in, and I know he's coming off an injury, but towards the back end of the year, he could make a difference.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm gutted because I really like Miles Sanders. I really want Miles Sanders to be a thing. It's just never going to happen.
I haven't even made a note about Miles Sanders. That's how out on Miles Sanders I think the world is.
I know. It's such a shame because I really do like him, and I think he could be an all right running back if someone just actually gave him a shot. But when Chuba Hubbard's taking reps over you, then maybe it's time to rethink your career. But yeah, Jonathan Brooks could be a hit towards the back end of the season. I think Chuba Hubbard's days are numbered. Xavier
Yeah.
Legette, I don't know. I mean, Deontay Johnson's worth picking up. Definitely worth picking up.
I've always liked
I'm-
Deontay Johnson. Go on, H. You're dying to say something, and it looks controversial. So I'm
looks-
putting it on.
Yeah,
It
exactly
is
like
going to
this.
be controversial. I
He thinks the Panthers are
personally
going to win the
think
division at 13 and
No.
4.
nothing like that. Like there's one key element to why I am high or higher on a couple of the Panthers players than yous, and you said it there, Pete. Canales gets the best out of offenses. Like you said, did it at Seattle, done it at the Bucks last year, goes into a head coaching role where he's going to be calling the plays. He made Baker Mayfield, who everyone written off, to the point where we were discussing at the start of last season whether Kyle Trask was going to be the starting quarterback over him, and made him look a decent quarterback. Now, I'm not saying it's solely down to him, but the Panthers O-line last year was a turnstile. It wasn't even an O-line. Like, I reckon me, Ian, and you could have done a better job. That is how they were absolutely
Strong words.
terrible.
Okay.
But like, they've added a few decent, solid O-linemen. All right, not world beaters, but steady enough players in there. I think they hit. I mean, some of the players that they drafted, I was massively high on. So I think I mentioned Jonathan Brooks as potentially being RB1 over Trey Benson. I think I said I had Benson ahead, but it's close between him and Brooks. Jonathan Brooks, we've not really seen anything out of him in college because he was the third choice behind Bijan and Roshan, and then played 10 games and did his ACL. But he had a great year. The wide receivers that he's got are two wide receivers that come in as wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2, and he's wide receiver 1 from the year before is now wide receiver 3. So I actually think he's got a couple of weapons there. He should have a better running back, and his tight end. I don't know, Ian, you were massively high on Hayden Hurst, but I'm massively high on Sanders because he is a pass catching tight end. He's not a blocking tight end. He's a pass catcher. He's going to be a threat. So in terms of fantasy, I'm probably higher on Bryce Young than a lot of people. And granted, I'm probably not going to draft him in a redraft league, but in best ball, I'm going to take a stab at him and probably at a higher ADP than he's going. I think Jonathan Brooks' ADP is probably a little bit too low on a redraft, in my opinion. I mentioned that on, I think it was the last episode. I'm definitely going to take a stab on Deontay Johnson, and I'm definitely probably going to end up wavering Sanders at some point, and I'm definitely going to take him in best ball as well. I think the Panthers players are all definite best ball players because there is a chance they're going to be brilliant, but that is what best ball is for. But I think a lot of them will end up on waiver wires fairly quickly when the season kicks in, because I think they've got enough and done enough to where they could be successful this year. And that's I know I've had a right rant to the point where Pete's just turning around and doing his laundry, but like I'm genuinely higher on them, and it is that Canales effect.
All right then.
There
was one spot between them. Who would you take, Derek Carr or Bryce Young?
Bryce Young.
Pete.
What am I taking him as? Because
Well, you can take him as a quarterback, mate.
I don't know what either of them then. Well, the only scenario
If it's your fourth quarterback in best ball.
Fourth quarterback in best ball, I would take Derek.
No. Redraft. Which one do you
I'm
want?
not taking either of them in redraft.
They're not. Neither of them are getting drafted in redraft.
Okay.
In our leagues.
All right. Okay then. In best ball, yeah, it's going to be Bryce Young, isn't it?
Bryce Young. There's more this year about Bryce Young.
I would go Derek Carr.
I'm
Fair enough.
the one that loves Derek Carr, Pete, not you. And I'm telling
No,
you,
but
it's Bryce Young.
The thing is, and the reason I go with Derek Carr is because of what I've just said about Derek Carr is he's like he's going to finish 16 or 17. That's what he does. So if you can give me if in any fantasy format, if you can give me the QB 30, or you can give me the QB 16, 17, but I don't have to draft him until QB 30, that's a win for me. I'm guaranteed a significant win. I understand that the ceiling for Bryce Young might be slightly higher, but that's a big if. He's still going to have to improve massively just to get to the same level that Derek Carr's at.
Okay, so I'll do this then. This year when he had Geno Smith, did you draft Geno Smith?
Probably not.
No. And Geno Smith finished as quarterback 8, if I remember right, 2 years ago.
I swear, Pete. I think he definitely drafted Geno Smith.
He picked him up. He drafted him last year. Did anyone draft Baker Mayfield last year? Where did Baker finish?
I don't know.
That's my point. Like this is why I'm higher on this the Panthers than probably anyone, and it is down to the offensive coordinator, or in this scenario, he's now head coach. I think he is that good. It's the same with.
10.
Say again, sorry, Pete.
Baker finished as QB 10.
Yeah, and nobody drafted him.
I mean, there's no way Bryce Young is doing that.
I don't think he does that. I don't think he does that, but I do think he has the chance to be top 16. I think he has a better year.
There you go. That's my point. Derek Carr is already top 16. He's always finishes at 16 or 17. Why would you take a chance on someone who has the chance to be top 16 when I could already give you one at the same price?
Bryce, I'll be honest, Bryce has the possibility of going higher purely on rushing ability. We didn't see it last year, but
what about Derek Carr's injury?
Yeah, you've spent 10 minutes and it's the most positive, and fair play to you, because it's the most positive 10 minutes I think you will find. Anyone listening will find any fantasy analyst or podcast giving on the Panthers this year. So I like it. I missed a little bit. I'm going to be honest, I missed a little bit because there was a massive spider on my desk, so I had to kill that. but other than that bit, it all sounded pretty good.
You've animal cruelty.
You're a monster.
Yeah, it was huge.
I
Getting a bit close.
The Panthers have done enough this off-season for me to go, they're not going to only get 3 wins. I think they've done enough. And granted, they've probably lost their 2 best players on defense, with Lovu going and Brian Burns going. And I'm still fairly confident that they're going to, defensively, they're going to be strong enough like they are most seasons. But I actually think they've done enough to then move forward and progress. I'd probably take Bryce Young. Trying to think who's probably around him.
Derek Carr.
I'm taking him over Derek Carr.
I'll tell you what, just quickly, before we've got time for this, because me and Ian have got zero. I'm guessing I've got nothing else to say about the Panthers. So.
Well, while you're looking at whoever you're looking at, Pete, I think the Panthers are going to go 2-15 again.
I just don't see it. I think they're a better team this year. I don't think they're going to, go from worst to first. I don't think they're going to uproot the NFC. But I don't see them just winning 2 games. I can see them winning 6, 7.
That's bold. Go on, Pete.
So since I did these notes, Bryce Young has moved up 2 places. So obviously people are already listening to you. But in and around it, your options are the 4 going before him are JJ McCarthy, Will Levis, Geno Smith, and Drake May. And the couple going after him are Bo Nix, Russell Wilson, Derek Carr. Ahead of that, you've got Deshaun Watson, Mayfield, Rodgers, Stafford, Cousins.
Okay.
I would take Will Levis and Russell Wilson.
I would take Levis.
I'm out on Will Levis. Cannot.
You're out on Will Levis. I'll give him a chance this year.
I'd take Levis and Young in
The
those.
weapons he's got, weapons that Will Levis has got this year. I'll take Will Levis over Bryce Young any day of the week. And you're out on Bryce Young. You're more out on Will Levis than you are on Bryce Young.
Yep.
Just because they're bananas.
Yep.
The mayo in the coffee.
Ridiculous. Right. Go on, Pete.
Oh, I thought you were going to run the thing.
You've got one job, Pete.
The last two times I've done this, I'm waiting for you to put the thing across the screen. This means nothing to anyone who's listening to us.
We don't do it on the full quarter.
I'm going to be honest. I enjoyed that episode more than I thought I was going to. The NFC South was not one of those that I was looking forward to, but I did enjoy it. It was good fun. Thanks for listening, as always. We've got 3 divisions down. Go back and listen to the other 2 if you didn't. We've got 5 to come. Share, as always. Like and subscribe to all of our social media at JMD Pod. We want to, as we go into our 2nd year following the NFL and doing fantasy football, we'd really like to start growing this even further. So we appreciate all the support we've had off everybody, but if we could grow it even more, everything you can do for us is much appreciated. So like, share, and follow and subscribe on YouTube, and we will see you next time.
Cheers, guys.